This is Ag Matters PM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, brought to you by the Iowa Soybean Association, your source for the latest Iowa ag news headlines right here in the heart of the heartland. With reports from our award-winning team of Dustin Hoffman, Riley Smith, Mark Magnuson, and Andy Peterson. Now, from the IARN studios in Des Moines, here's Dustin.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ag Matters PM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. I'm Dustin Huffman. Today is Thursday, the 21st of August, 2025. So glad you could join us. Hard to believe that the month of August is almost over. In fact, school starting for most kids in the state coming up here on Monday, mine included. Coming up a little later on the program, we'll talk with the folks at agmarket.net to find out what happened in the closing markets. But first, Andy Peterson joins us. He had a chance to talk with Beck's agronomist Lee Koenigsfeld, what he's seeing in his part of the state when it comes to crops, as we get ready to roll into the harvest season very soon.
There's lots to talk about here as harvest approaches. Finishing is important, and the growing season is a long one. There's no doubt about that, with some, to a certain degree, gaudy numbers coming out of some of the crop tours. Growing season, Lee Koenigsfeld, is not over with quite yet, right?
We still have a long ways to go. So I am optimistic on some of the numbers that I'll say the Pro Farmer Tour is coming out with, but that's their numbers. What we actually get into the combine can be a different story. So,
Iowa looks good compared to Illinois. There's no question about that this year.
Well,
but
we're due for a good year, right? I mean, Illinois has had good years the last couple of years, so I feel like it's our turn, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'd be about the middle of the eighth inning or so if we were playing a baseball game, probably.
Yeah. I mean, we're definitely past the seventh inning stretch. We're probably in the middle of that, either top of the eighth or middle of the eighth. I'd say we're kind of in that neck of the woods if we were playing baseball.
So which crop has more to lose at this point? Probably soybeans, huh?
Soybeans, we can definitely take a lot of yield from soybeans yet. We look at beans in that, probably getting most beans in that R5 window right now. The big issue right there now, we're starting to see in fields is a lot of sudden death starting to show up as you drive around the countryside. You're certainly seeing those visual symptoms show up now. And SDS, we have to remember, is a disease that infects very early on in the growing season. That Fusarium fungal pathogen infects the crown of the soybean basically, and it hangs out there throughout the entire growing season. What we're starting to see now is basically the visual symptoms of a toxin that Fusarium fungus produces. Once vegetative growth stops, we can't outpace that toxin. And so then we start to see that visual intervenal chlorosis that is so closely associated with SDS. But we have to remember that sets in early. And so our foliar fungicides that we put on at that R3 timeframe are not really doing us a lot of good as far as SDS tolerance. They may help just with general plant health, but they're not really going to shut SDS down in any way, shape, or form. The biggest thing there is going to be a high quality seed treatment to help protect from SDS and trumping that variety selection.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that a little bit, because one of the unique features of this spring was the deep frost last winter kept soil temperatures cold basically until the end of May. Before we were able to hit and maintain a 70-degree number. And I suppose that's, especially on some of the early planted stuff, coming back to haunt us a little bit.
Yeah, and so we've been preaching, and obviously Beck's, with our practical farm research, we've got our planting date studies that we've done for years and years and years. And so we've been pushing this, early to mid-April timeframe, trying to get both corn and beans in the ground for hitting that optimal yield. And this is one of those years where potentially maybe having a little bit later planting date might end up being a good thing for us, because as I'm looking at fields and talking to growers, like, what's the planting date? Where are we at? A lot of our April beans are definitely showing some more probably SDS pressure than what we're seeing in some of our May planted soybeans. Now, it's not to say that the May planted soybeans don't end up getting some SDS in them, but because those April beans are a little bit further along, we're definitely seeing it in those April planted beans right now, and some of those May planted beans we're jury's still out a little bit, but I do expect probably to see at least some SDS, probably pretty widespread across Northeast Iowa anyway, for sure, as the growing season continues to wind down. But yeah, beans are, we've definitely got top end to take off the beans. When we look at that, they're still trying to fill those pods out. We get disease come in at the wrong time. All of a sudden they can't fill those pods, and so you start getting really, really small beans, or they don't fill out and swell up nearly as much, and then you get a bunch of flat pods, which are not going to bushel up very, very fast in the combine.
Or it's too wet, which it is in part of the state. The legume more susceptible to that maybe than the grass, huh?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Why is that?
So soybeans just in general handle drier weather better than what corn does. A little bit of a function of how that plant is designed. They with the taproot system, they do a little bit better with better drainage, keeping that water profile down lower to where they can explore that upper soil profile, look and pull nutrients. It also keeps our fungal pathogen load down a lot more on the soybean side as well too. We've seen a lot of late season Phytophthora this year. And that's just a lot of it is just a function of too much. And when we look at soybeans in particular, we need soybeans, even though we don't put nitrogen on them, they require a lot of nitrogen. And when you have too much moisture and you go anaerobic, which we've got a fair amount of fields that went anaerobic at times this year, you shut down that plant's ability to nodulate and you kill what nodules you do have. So that relationship then has to start back up all over again once we start getting oxygen back into the soil. And so you'll see beans that have that sick yellow, nitrogen deficient look. And a lot of that can be due to just lack of nodulation because we lost oxygen in the soil profile.
Yeah, we were talking about that. Certainly, we talked about low pH problems that probably have shown up this year in the beans as well. On the corn side of things, I guess I say corn or beans have more to lose than corn. The exception to that may be the southern rust this year. And of course, as it cools off, then you start to think about tar spot some again too.
Yeah, next week's weather looks very favorable for tar spot to really kind of come in. And what we've seen in the past, at least my kind of personal experience with tar spot anyway, is if you give it a dancing partner, so to speak, it can be deadly. And we've definitely given it a dancing partner with Southern Rust this year. A lot of fields that had, I'll say, early fungicide flowing on right at that VTR1, maybe slightly before tassel. That initial fungicide application is it's gone basically. We pretty well tapped through any residual value we're going to get out of that, and so we're starting to see on some of those fields that southern rust continue to progress up that corn canopy, and we know that we want to try to keep that upper canopy from that ear leaf and higher. We want to keep that as clean as possible to try to protect as much yield as we can. So we will see what the southern how the southern rust handles cool temperatures next week. I'm guessing the southern rust will slow down next week with cooler temperatures, but I do think the tar spot's going to pick up the pace, and we're starting to see that. I've been starting to see that come into some of the more susceptible hybrids are definitely starting to show more tar spot than they were a couple weeks ago.
This is maybe going to sound like an off the wall question, but do you consider another fungicide treatment if we're wearing out, or is the value just not there? There's big yield out there. I mean, or if, at least if you think there is.
A lot of that is going to depend on where your corn's at. A lot of the corn is starting to dent now, is where I'm at. And at that point in time, the economics, especially with what we've seen the corn market do the last couple weeks, the economics are going to make it really hard to justify it. Now, can you make an argument that from a late season standability, maybe it still pencils at that point in time? Absolutely. You could make that argument, but from a strictly disease suppression standpoint and yield protection from just the ear, not factoring in stock quality and standability, it gets really hard to justify. But if we really think we need to watch some of those late season stocks, maybe coming in there might not be the worst thing in the world. So because we are definitely seeing some stock issues start to show up as we get in there. Physoderma brown spot has been rampant out in cornfields. Again, that's another disease that infects early through the whorl at like that V5-ish time frame. And then we start to see it show up foliar, which the foliar one's not the big one to worry about. It's when we start getting it into the nodes. When we see that Physoderma node rot, that can be very devastating, and certainly some hybrids are more susceptible to that than others. And so anything we can do from that standpoint. Denitrification, with all the rainfall this year, we are going to see some stocks start to cannibalize and move things around. And so maintaining and keeping an eye on how healthy are these stocks, are they cannibalizing really hard, is going to be something to keep an eye on, as well as just we're starting to see, and splitting some stocks here, starting to see some crown rot start to really kind of rear up as well too. So I mean, you name it, basically in the corn, we can still have some issues and still rob a lot of yield, because it's really hard to pick corn plants up off the ground. So it's going to be very important to scout your fields, know how good your stocks are going into this harvest season, because with the way the markets are, we need every bushel we can get.
Absolutely. And of course, there's plenty of research on any of this and all of this at the Practical Farm Research Guide, or in the Practical Farm Research Guide at beckshybrids.com.
That again was Andy Peterson and Beck's agronomist Lee Koenigsfeld. We're going to take a short break and hear from our sponsor, the Iowa Soybean Association, and the Soy Checkoff. When we come back, we're going to go through the closing markets. This is Ag Matters PM.
Iowa Soybean Association is driven to deliver for Iowa's 40,000 soybean farmers. We're proud to provide objective agronomic research, a helping hand with soil and water stewardship, and timely industry news powered by the Soybean Checkoff. Learn more at iasoybeans.com.
It's time now for the Ag Matters PM Closing Market Summary, your source for market analysis and settlement prices from the day's trade in Chicago, courtesy of the folks at agmarket.net. We're back on Ag Matters PM here on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. Time to run down the closing markets. I'm being joined by Jason Meyer of agmarket.net. Jason, we were just saying before we got on here that it was a little surprising to see what came out of the positive territory here today in those grains.
Yeah, that's for sure, Dustin. The overnight was relatively quiet, not much going on. Then we saw some export sales come out early this morning. Fantastic number on corn, and the highest number we've seen for new crop soybean sales all year. That's about 41 million bushels of beans. And you look at the corn, it's about 111% better than what we were this time a year ago. So even without China, we're seeing some very strong exports. And that old adage, low prices cure low prices, maybe coming true here. And then you had President Trump, or some people talking that President Trump might speak regarding the small refinery exemptions. So a lot of the people in the biofuels space think that could be a positive for the market. And yeah, the export sales took us to gave us some good momentum. And then the SREs coming in just kind of took us higher, and then the technical buying came in, and just so three positives on the day, and a nice close on corn and soybeans here today.
All right, well then moving over to the livestock side of things, we know cattle's been on that rocket ship higher. How did they fare here today?
Yeah, cattle finished the day up a little higher again. We had some feeders making new contract highs. We got cash trade this week, so a little bit stronger. The cattle market's just not going away quite yet, and the hogs actually were able to bounce a little bit today. They're kind of hitting some resistance at the 50-day moving average, but we're seeing some life come back to the hog market as well here.
All right, well, if folks want to talk about some of the intel you guys have at agmarket.net, maybe you want to talk about some of the things they should be thinking about with their marketing of their grains, what's the best way for them to get in touch and find some of that information?
Go to our website, agmarket.net, and reach out to myself or any of my teammates, and we'd be happy to speak with you.
All right, Jason Meyer's been the guest here today. Jason, thanks so much for the insight. We'll talk again real soon.
Thanks, Dustin. Everybody have a good day now.
And that was a check of our closing market analysis with the folks at agmarket.net. Let's run down the closing numbers now on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network market screen. At the close, September corn up 7 1/4 at 387 1/4. Soybeans up 19 1/2 at 1034 1/2. Soy meal up $4.80 at 296.80. Soy oil up $2.44 at 53.64. Chicago wheat up 1 1/2 at 507 even. Kansas wheat up 2 1/2 at 503 1/4. Kansas spring wheat was up 8 1/2 at 540 1/2. Minneapolis spring wheat up 1/2 at 570 even. Oats down 2 1/4 at 323 1/4. Live cattle were down 12 cents at 234.72. Feeders down 7 cents at 358.02. Lean hogs down 2 cents at 89.92. Pork cutouts unchanged at 102.22, and Class 3 milk 32 cents lower at 18.43. And that's been a check of our market recap, and that brings us to the end of today's show. You can find all our content online at iowaagnet.com, as well as on Facebook, X, and our YouTube channel. While you're there, subscribe and hit the bell icon so you're notified each time we put out a new video project. You can also subscribe to our market podcast and get replays of the Iowa Ag Matters podcast every day, weekend Ag Matters, and much more through the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network podcasts channel, or you can go through Google, Amazon, Apple, Spotify, and Podbean. From the iARN studios in Des Moines, I'm Dustin Huffman. For Mark Magnuson, Andy Peterson, and Riley Smith, we thank you for watching. This has been Ag Matters PM.